Judges chapter 19, reading from verse 22. Now, as they were making their hearts merry, behold, the men of the city, certain sons of Belial, beset the house around about, and beat at the door, and spake to the master of the house, the old man, saying, Bring forth the men that came unto thy house, that we may know them. And the man, the master of the house, went out unto them and said, Nay, my brethren, nay, I pray you, do not so wickedly, seeing that this man is come into mine house. Do not this folly. Behold, here is my daughter, a maiden, and his concubine. And I will bring them now, and humble ye them. Do with them what seemeth good unto you. But unto this man do not do such a vile thing. But the men would not hearken to him. So the man took his concubine and brought her forth unto them. So the man took his concubine and brought her forth unto them, and they knew her and abused her all night until the morning. And when the day began to spring, they let her go. Then came the woman in the dawning of the day, and fell down at the door of the man's house, where her lord was, till it was light. And her lord, that's the Levite, rose up in the morning and opened the doors of the house, and went out to go his way. And behold, a woman, his concubine, was fallen down at the door of the house, and her hands were upon the threshold. And he said unto her, Up, and let us be going. But none answered. Then the man took her up on his ass, and the man rose up and got him unto his place. And when he was come to his house, he took a knife and laid hold on his concubine and divided her, bringing together with her bones into 12 pieces, and sent her into all the coasts of Israel. And it was so that all that saw it said, There was no such thing done, or nor sin from the day that the children of Israel came out of the land of Egypt unto this day. Consider of it, take advice, and speak your minds. Last week, when we ended this narrative, if you recall, we stopped at the old man. We are not given his name, inviting the Levite and his concubine to spend the night because he saw them in the square and he did not want to leave them to spend the night in the square. So the Levite and his concubine went to the man's house and his home and ate a meal, and they were preparing to rest when the relaxed atmosphere was suddenly broken by banging on the door and the sinister reality of how inhospitable this town really is. Remember, the Levite, he refused to stop at the tongue of Jebus, which had strangers. If you recall in Judges chapter 19, he said, we will not turn unto the city of a stranger. This is not of the children of Israel. And he came and he said, we are going to go to Gibeah because it belonged to the children of Benjamin. So he decided, he didn't know what the people of the Jebusites would do to him. These were the non-Israelites. For those of you who are Adventists and feel good, the non-Adventists. He didn't know what they were going to do to him. He didn't trust them too much. So he said, let me go to my people from the tribe of the Benjamites. At least they are of the household of faith. At least they are my brothers and sisters, though we are from different countries. At least they are my brothers and sisters, though we are from different churches. Let me go to a Christian church. But there in Gibeah, among the children of Israel, while the Levites and his concubine was enjoying a meal with the old man, some of the men, Israelites, church brothers, I want this to sink home. These are not men who don't know God. These are men who know God. They came pounding on the door and shouted, bring out the man. They didn't want the woman, you know. They said, bring out the man. Verse 22, that came to your house so that we may know them. The word know there in the Bible means that we may have sexual relations with them. Now, this sin is similar, if you recall, to a sin you read in Genesis. You remember when Lot entertained the two angels who visited him during the time he lived in Sodom? And the wicked men of the city, well, I can understand Sodom, because Sodom didn't know God. Sodom was, pagan, if you please. And the men of Sodom came to Lot in Genesis 19, verse 4 and 5. And they said, where are the men who came to you? Bring them out that we may know them. The only shocking difference here is that Sodom was a pagan city, but Gibeah was God's people. I mean, this is revelatory. In fact, so here is it. Not only were the Sodomites wanting to commit homosexual acts, but here in Judges, God's people, the Benjamites, the Levite thought he was safe in Gibeah. But here, now I want to tell you this morning, sometimes what happened in and among God's people is no different to what happens in the world. In fact, there's sometimes we do worse in the church than people in the world. The same acts that Sodom committed are now being practiced among Israel by the Benjamites. It tells me that sometimes you are not even safe among God's professed people. Well, you don't have to go far to understand that. Sometimes not even our children are safe in church. I don't have to say more on that. Sometimes not even the vulnerable are safe among God's. Gone are the days when you tell yourself, well, it's church people. I'm sure the Levites said, well, it is God's people. Well, not everyone who call themselves people of God are of God. At least the Levites, ah, can you imagine to come to a place where people know God and are, are believers in God, and among them are hiding evil? Make no mistake about it, there's a lot of evil, even in the church. Not everyone in the church is of God. Now, as I read this, I told myself, there is nothing new under the sun, because here is it. The very thing that God condemns Sodom over are being practiced by his people. You would have thought that that acts of such vile abomination would only be read about in Genesis. But here in Judges 19:22 to 30, it's not the Sodomites doing it, it is the Israelites. It tells me, brethren, that you shouldn't trust, don't trust in men. Don't trust in the arm of flesh. You got to put your trust in God. Because the Levite, I'm sure he would have expected not this, not this. No, 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 no. As I read this passage this morning, you got to give me some excuse, because the old man said to the mob, he said, "Look, here is my virgin daughter. She has never known a man, and the man's concubine. I will bring them out to you and do to them whatever you wish. But but the man, don't take the man." But the man didn't want that. They wanted the men. Such acts of disgrace and abomination being perpetuated by God's people. It tells me that you got to work out your own salvation with fear and trembling. There is nothing called salvation by association. Being in God's church does not make you God's people. There are a lot of wolves in sheep clothing in the church, hiding in the church. Now, I'm not saying every Israelite was bad, but clearly these who came to commit acts of sodomity, of to these acts of degradation and vileness, clearly these Israelites had lost their way. They were Israelites in name, but pagan in hearts. Because it's possible to be in church, but out of Christ. There might be some who, like these Israelites, are hiding behind the name of God in church. So not because you see me with a Bible and a songbook and a quarterly in my hand in church, it means that everything is right with me. Some folks in church need Jesus. Judges 19. And the Bible said the offer was made, but the men of the city didn't want it. Now, earlier in the narrative, um, But verse 25 said the men of the city would not hearken. So the man, that's the Levite, took his concubine and brought her forth to them. Now, this is rather interesting here because if you recall, the Levite spoke tenderly to his concubine. Remember when he went to win her back? Um, in Genesis, in Judges chapter 19, verse 3, the Bible said he was tenderly, he spoke friendly to her. So I would have thought that since she decided to come back home with him, that he would have bravely defended her honor. So there was one shock wave in this episode. The first shock wave is that among God's people, you have despicable acts being committed. Among the Israelites, you have men hiding in wolves' clothing who are evil in their hearts. That's a shock. You don't expect that among God's people. But the other shock in this narrative is that the Levite, whose concubine left him and went home to her father, and then he went and begged for her to come back home. She didn't want to come back home and in this story, we are now finding out the reason why she didn't want to go back home. The Bible didn't tell us exactly why she left. But I can use my sanctified imagination now and understand why she left. Some men come to abuse your wife. And as a husband, you're going to push her in front. In fact, the Bible said, he took his concubine who left you for 4 months. He took his concubine who went back to her father's house where she was treated good, pleaded for her to come home with him. And now she's in trouble. You wouldn't jump in front of your concubine, your wife, because she's not no concubine. The Bible uses concubine, but you treat her as your wife. You wouldn't jump in front of your wife and say, listen, I'm dying. You would have thought that the Levite would have defended her honor and said, I am losing my life for this woman tonight. I've just redeemed her from her father's house. Her father treated me so kindly for 5 days. You have to take me before you take my wife. You have to come through me, because a man, a husband, a father ought to defend their family. A husband don't push his wife in front, Well, I remember the story of a guy and his girlfriend who, they were walking, and he was holding her hands and telling her how much he loved her, and how much he would risk his life for her, and telling her that he cannot live without her, and he will swim the ocean for her. And just as he said that, a dog jumped over the fence of the yard of his master's yard and was coming after them. You think that young man who just told the girl he would swim the ocean for her, you think he would take her and put her on his shoulder and run with her. No, my man left the girl and run. He left her and run. Sometimes when trouble comes, that's when you see where true love is. When trouble comes, when sickness comes, when adversity comes, that's when you see where true love is. Some men walk away from women when they are in trouble, when she's in trouble and pain and sickness and cancer strikes. Listen, folks, you see true love when things get worse. The vows did not say for better only. It said for better, for worse. It didn't say in health. Some of us men, we only stick around in the good times. The Levite reminds us of what should not happen in a marriage relationship. You stay with each other in the bad times. This is worse. This is the bad times. Some men want to abuse your wife. You're going to push her outside. I wish I could preach on that some more this morning. Time is going on me. So the Bible said, let me tell you, I never knew these stories were in the Bible, So right now, in fact, the book of Judges has everything in it. Everything is in the book of Judges. So he took his concubine, his wife, and pushed her outside to them. And the Bible said that the result was appalling. This husband, can you imagine? A husband, the Levite, the priest, pushed his wife outside. And he didn't even check on her during the night. Because the Bible said the men of the city abused her all night. Listen, brethren, that makes my blood shiver. To know that the Levite, who just won back his wife, pushed her outside so the men of the city, God's people, could abuse her. All night. And there is nowhere in the Bible where they say, well, he went out and tried to rescue her. The Bible never said that, which means the man, the Levite, was sleeping inside the house, comfortable, while his wife was outside. What kind of man is that? Well, you should have left her with her father. If you know you did not love her, why go and take her from her father's house? You spoke so tenderly to her. And now you brought her. You could have defended her. You chose not. And this is the reason why she left him in the first place. Because he was not a nice man. Well, he was not a nice priest. Let me put it that way. Not just a man, he was a priest. He was not a nice priest. Maybe he was nice in church to everybody. But clearly, well, he didn't even go outside and pray for her. Remember, he's a priest, The Bible even says he knelt down and prayed during the night and said, Lord, spare my wife. He remained silent while his wife was abused. Let me end this quickly now. So you understand why she left him in the first place, because he was not a nice man. He never treated her right at home. He never really loved her. So that's why she left him. And she should have stayed at her father's house. That's why when you see, when some wives leave houses, they have reasons for leaving, Okay, let me not start a new topic this morning. But The Bible said something interesting, though. The Bible said, so she came the morning and she staggered to the house after being abused for the night. And she fell down at the door of the house. And he said to her, he didn't even go and raise her up and say, "How you doing, honey?" No, he came to her and he said, "Up." Can you imagine the callousness of this priest? You just took your wife from the father's house for 4 months. She was just abused for the whole night. And then you just come outside, and the Bible said in verse 28, he said to her, "Up and let us be going." As if she's some object with no feelings. At least you would have thought that the Levite would have come and lifted her up. She would be weak. Come on, find out how is she doing. But you're talking to her as if she, you know, I never know the Bible has so much callousness. Men, not just men, priests, men of God whose hearts are filled with such callousness. But not only that, the Bible said, let me end this here quickly. Where he said to her, "Up," but she didn't answer, which suggests that she may have passed away. Because he said to her, "Up," and the Bible said he didn't answer. She was unconscious, so that it could also mean that she was unconscious. Um, and so she was either dead or unconscious. And he took her and he put her on his donkey and went home. And when he arrived home, he did something atrocious. He took a knife, cut up his concubine, limb by limb. And the Bible says in verse 29 of Judges, he sent her throughout all Israel, all different parts of Israel. This is really shocking because the Israelites are acting here like Sodom, and the Levite is treating the woman he had gone such lengths to win back with appalling cruelty. Because if he loved her, and I'm going to end on this, if she had died, he would have given her the dignity of a burial. If you love your wife so much, why not give her a decent burial? But we may wonder why such hideous events recorded in the Bible. Well, I think it shows us, despite being God's people, the Israelites who lived in Canaan had Sodom in them, including the Levite. The Levite was no different to the men who abused his wife. And it is easy to read stories like this and conclude that we could not be as cruel as them. But if we do so, we will be challenged by this message. The incident recounted in this chapter urges us to ask the question, what lies beneath our claims to be God's people? Are we just simply God's people in name? Or are we really God's people? We may say the right things, but what lies beneath the surface? The Bible said, "Do not let the world squeeze you into its mold. Do not let the dictates of our culture squeeze us into a mold." Here we see in Judges chapter 19 that though God's people were out of Egypt, they were still worse than the Egyptians. And even the Levite, the supposed man of God, he was no different to the world in which he lived. May God help us this morning, that we will take heed of our lives Amen. Father in heaven, thank you for the word this morning. In Jesus' name, amen.